So the war in Ukraine is moving in a phase that could prove far more significant than most people realize. On the surface, what we're seeing looks familiar. Russia hurling missiles and drones across Ukrainian cities. Ukraine firing back with drones of its own. But this time, there is more going on beneath the surface. Several developments colliding all at once, revealing a deep vulnerability inside Putin's Russia that could reshape not only the war itself, but also the way the world understands it and the way Putin approaches it. And the key point is, at first glance, doesn't look like anything radical. Ukraine has been striking Russian infrastructure for months, even years. But when you examine which facilities are being targeted, how often they're being struck, the timing of these campaigns, and of course the wider economic and geopolitical context, it becomes clear that this isn't just more of the same. It's a concentrated strategy aimed at one of Putin's weakest points: Russia's entire fuel system, the network that sustains the army, feeds the economy, and props up Putin's domestic stability. So in this video, I want to bring these pieces together because this is the kind of context that's too often missing from the mainstream media. The headlines will tell you there's another strike, another fire, another refinery damaged. But when you put those layers into sequence and layer in the economic realities, the timing of the strikes, and the political stakes, you start to see the bigger picture. A bigger picture that points to something potentially game-changing.
This is The Global Gambit.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. And in this video, we're going to explore what is actually happening right now, the latest strikes and their scale, what it means for Ukraine's military strategy, for Russia's economy, and for Putin's grip at home, why it matters, how fuel shortages and public frustration connect back to the war effort and only going to loom larger as the war encroaches upon the public, and well, what might come next, whether this pressure can escalate into a turning point or whether Russia can still find a way to patch over these, well, permanently growing cracks. But the question is, are these strikes just another cycle of pressure, or are we watching the start of something much more serious that could tip the balance? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. So let us start with immediate context. It's the end of August, which means the end of summer, the end of dacha season, and the dream or reality being kicking in for Russians as they return to work and the autumn begins to make, well, the rising considerations of fuel and limitations of heat and energy availability much more prevalent. Nothing in this war happens in isolation. Overnight, Russia launched one of its biggest barrages yet, nearly 540 drones and 45 missiles across 14 regions. In Zaporizhia, one woman was killed and over 30 people injured. In Dnipro, a home was leveled and a shopping centre torn apart. The Kremlin basically boasting that, quote, all designated targets were hit, though that claim is always impossible to independently verify. And this isn't an outlier. Just days ago, Kiev endured the second largest aerial attack of the entire war, with at least 25 people killed. On the ground, Russia continues pushing for footholds in Dnipropetrovsk and the fortress cities around it. But this is where it matters, because Ukraine's retaliation, it might just look like routine, but details do matter, and often where, well, the media doesn't quite cover them. From my perspective and the people that I know within Russia and Ukraine, drones that hit the Krasnodar and Syzran refineries, which together account for 4% of Russia's oil production, including crucial aviation fuel, are having immediate implications. Videos we've seen have shown massive fireballs, Russian officials even admitting damage, but have tried to downplay it. Robert Brovidi, head of Ukraine's unmanned systems, has confirmed this operation, noting cooperation with the Special operations forces. But it's the tempo that stands out and is not often accounted for in mainstream reporting. Because in August alone, Ukraine has struck 10 oil refineries, disrupting facilities that process nearly 20% of Russia's capacity. That's roughly 1.1 million barrels per day. That's sustained structural disruption, not one-off pot shots and, well, something that can be quickly repaired. And it shows you the growing audacity, the unnervedness of the Ukrainian military intelligence services, as we saw with Operation Spiderweb earlier in the year, to go further and further into Russia proper. And this campaign is no longer limited to border areas. Ukrainian intelligence confirmed a strike in Tula, that's over 130 kilometers south of Moscow, against an underground depot storing pyroxene, rockets, gunpowder, all used as part of their artillery efforts against Ukraine. Russian officials claim their air defenses worked, but the bigger point is clear. Ukraine is going after the very supply chains that sustain Putin's war efforts. Now, Russia has faced fuel shortages before, 2011, 2018, 2021, 2023, and Ukraine has struck refineries before. But in 2024, each strike was usually hit maybe once, possibly twice. Capacity dipped a bit, repairs though followed, and production resumed as normal. Irritatingly costly, survivable though, and, well, something that you could sort of turn a blind eye away from, especially if it's the Russian media that likes to, well, rough over the edges and make it very clear to the Russian public that everything is under control. But 2025 looks so different. Ukraine now fields more drones, better navigation, and larger swarms that overwhelm Russian defenses. Instead of single strikes, they're rolling attacks. The same facility hit repeatedly, forcing shutdown, and delaying, well, the already rather laborious repairs. And the timing is brutal for Moscow. The strikes begin in August, when demand spikes with the harvest season and that summer travel. And even as supply dips due to annual maintenance shutdowns, well, by mid-August, damage stretched across Yukhata, Ryazan, Saratov, Volgograd, and the entire Samara cluster. Even Rostov and Krasnodar have been harassed completely. Not all of these are equal. Yukhata is small and peripheral. Rostov and Krasnodar skewer export-orientated. But the Ryazan to Volgograd arc powers tens of millions of Russians across the country's heartland, from agriculture to simply tourists. That's where disruption becomes systemic vulnerability. Now, this is the part where YouTube expects me to say like and subscribe, and consider this your reminder. It's free and it does help my analysis, my takes, my efforts to give you objective but straightforward coverage to more people. As someone who hails from Russia but has been brought up in the UK, I like to feel that I can give a understanding of both sides, but as balanced as possible. Let me know what you think as well with the comments. Now, the results are already visible. Wholesale prices broke last year's record in June. By late August, A92 wholesale prices rose from 47 to 53 rubles per litre, brushing retail at 59. Retail prices have crept up weekly by 15 to 20 kopecks. The margin between wholesale and retail is evaporating. And while that sounds perhaps a little bit technical, what it means is that Russians can no longer think that the Russian government, the Kremlin, has this under control. The economic overheating is becoming more and more a reality. Then there are the images. Gas stations empty in parts of the Far East. Prices topping 78 rubles per litre in the Kuril Islands. Sales of A92 suspended in Crimea. Rationing by coupon. Imagine, just think about that. We are seeing rationing by coupon or card in 2025, a country considered one of the great powers, because of how much the Ukrainian strikes are having an impact. Projectionists online sell petrol for 220 rubles a litre. That's about $10 a gallon. This isn't just about economics, therefore. It's all about that perception. Long queues, rationing, and empty pumps undermine any illusion of control. Production is sliding too. In the first 19 days of August, gas output dropped 8%, about 10% year on year. Moscow has scrambled with patches, pausing exports, emergency meetings with bosses, but Ukraine is degrading capacity faster than Russia can recover. And here is the most overlooked factor I think you should keep in mind. Russia's geography. We talk about it as the big country, 9 time zones, but this is where it's Russia's massive Achilles heel. Vast distances, long supply lines, and regions dependent on just a few refineries. Now, normally that scale could be argued as a strength, but now it's an absolute weakness. Moscow is insulated by nearby refineries, but in the Far East and Crimea, disruptions bite fast, especially during the summer where people like to go to the warmer climates. Geography makes some regions far more fragile than others, and that fragility is exactly what Ukraine is able to expose. Yes, Russia still produces more gasoline than it consumes. And yes, diesel is abundant, shielding the army for now. But combined repeat shutdowns, rigid price controls, high interest rates, and transport disruptions, well, they affect the average individual, which ultimately can put pressure on the government, which then affects the military. And you can get a system lurching from one local crisis to another. So if Ukraine keeps up this pressure, especially as we enter the drier autumn and then the freezing winter, the Kremlin faces bad choices. Scrap price controls and let prices spike, relax standards so off-grade fuel can be sold, or impose rationing. None of these options come without economic and political cost. But lastly, this isn't just about fuel, it's about strategy. Ukraine is proving it can raise the domestic cost of war for Russia whenever it wants. The pain is felt not in abstract sanctions, but at the pumps, on the farms, on the holiday roads. Europe, meanwhile, is still tightening sanctions. £210 billion euros in frozen assets under discussion in Denmark, with France pushing for even tougher measures. That international pressure abroad, logistical disruption at home. This is a two-front squeeze that Kiev is striving for. And so why does this matter for now? Because Ukraine is no longer content with symbolic strikes. It is systematically trying to degrade Russia's fuel infrastructure at the exact moment when demand is highest and supply is increasingly stretched. The war is no longer confined to Donbass trenches. It now runs through refineries in Samara, deports in Tula, and queues in Crimea. For Ukraine, the goal is clear. Force Moscow into impossible trade-offs. Repair or rockets. Home front or front line. For Russia, the risk is systemic. Creeping shortages that choke agriculture, strain logistics, and corrode public confidence, all while the war still consumes resources. If Ukraine sustains this pressure and Europe tightens the financial noose, the impact could become more consequential than any other we've seen so far. If not, relief may come with autumn's lower demand, but each repair will take longer, each workaround more costly, and each crisis remind Russians of their ever-growing vulnerability and Putin's growing competence. If you enjoyed this video, then do consider leaving it a like and subscribe for more ones coming up. We have the developments in Shanghai, in China, where Putin is meeting with India and China. Huge developments on the ground. Now, my name is Pyotr. I'm half English and Russian, as I said, but I've studied in the West and done a lot of focus analysis of Russia. And I try to connect the dots and show why these details matter in a way that the mainstream media does not. So consider subscribing and watch this video next to understand another perspective you might not have thought of about the war in Ukraine. Take care.